Hey y'all, welcome back to the book stand. My name is Kate, and today I'm going to be talking about something very near and dear to my good old Southern heart, which is Southern Queer Stories, which I've titled Y'all Means All. I used to have a t-shirt from my university's Pride Center that said Y'all Means All, but I lost it, and I've literally never worn a garment more in my life. But anyways, for Pride Month, one of the things that I really wanted to, not only in my own reading, but also sort of provide a resource for other people, is Southern queer stories. Because so many times, I hear all of these really great stories about queer people living in these, really queer-friendly, whatever that means, places, big cities, when the lives of rural queer people, that is a tongue twister.
The rural juror
Are sort of marginalized, left out. People always think that we're trying to escape from rural life, when a lot of people, that's what they love, that's what they like, that's their home. And I just think that's something that it's a common misconception. So I just wanted to focus on some really awesome queer authors and queer stories from the South. To kick it off, I want to talk about one of my, I think this made my top 10 books of last year, and that is Southernmost by Silas House. And Silas House is a gay man who grew up in rural Kentucky, worked for the post office before writing his first book, and he's now written several books, many of which I have yet to read but are on my TBR. I have right here A Parchment of Leaves, which is an autographed copy that I'm so excited that I own. But Southernmost was the first book I read by him, and it just blew me away. It is set originally in the Cumberland Plateau of Tennessee, which is where I currently live. And it basically follows a small town preacher after he meets two gay men who have moved in next to him, and sort of has a come to Jesus meeting, if you will, about how he treats people. It has a breakdown at his church about them basically voting to not let the gay people into the church, which happens all of the time. That's something that still happens. And essentially takes his son and flees from the community that he's a part of. And he flees down to Key West to hide. He ends up hiding down there to really spend time with his son. And the reason that he went there was because that is the last place that he knows that his brother lived, and he's not talked to his brother since his parents kicked his brother out for being gay. And so I just found it such a sort of realistic story about unlearning behaviors that you have sort of been indoctrinated into, and learning that just because you figured out now that that's oh, gay people are cool, that doesn't necessarily undo the trauma that you might have done to other people. And it was just handled so expertly. It is such a fun story, even while having these really powerful emotional themes. It's just I think it's Silas House's masterpiece, and I really love it. He also has his Clay's Quilt trilogy. This is a part of it, along with Clay's Quilt and The Coal Tattoo. I definitely recommend reading his work, especially if you've been looking to read more Appalachian lit. You should. It's great. Just to understand this place that I love so much. I love his work so much. The second book I'm recommending is, spoiler alert, Red, White, and Royal Blue. I know, I think I talk about this book on my channel almost every other video. It's really that good. It's so good. But I wanted to specifically include it in this video because I figure most people have actually already read it, but I really love experiencing that book from a Southern lens. Alex is a man of color from the South, and that ties deeply into his personhood. And I've never seen a more accurate representation of how it changes you to grow up as a queer person in the South. Literally, it was Casey McQuiton lifted conversations that I've had with my friends and put them into that book. It was just, I've never felt more seen. So I definitely recommend that if you're looking to reread Red, White, and Royal Blue this Pride Month, to look at it through a Southern lens and sort of look at a different take on this book that so many people love. So just throwing that out there. Casey McQuiton is from the Deep South, and they have my whole heart. The next book I'm going to recommend is The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Deesha Philyaw, which is a short story collection that was shortlisted for the National Book Award, and I loved it. It is so good. Like, there's nothing, I feel like short stories collections are one of those things that really shows how good a writer is, because if your short story collection is not great, then it's meh. Like, there's not usually ones where I'm like, oh, that was good, because there's not that consistent theme. If I read a story that I just don't connect with, I don't really like, I don't feel like was as good as the others, I feel like it drags the whole reading experience down more than maybe there's just a section of a novel that I didn't like as much, you know? So to have a fantastic short story collection is difficult. This is one of the best ones I've ever read. Secret Lives of Church Ladies. And it just has, it really unpacks, again, this idea of what a church lady is, and this is specifically looking at Black women in the South and Appalachia, and it just really kind of subverts your expectations at every go and was just brilliant. I loved it so much. If you have not read this, definitely read it. Request it from your library. It is so good, and I think more people need to read it, because outside of my like Appalachian circles, I don't know if that many people that have read it. But it is queer, it is great, it is Southern. I love it. The next book I have to recommend is The Prettiest Star by Carter Sickels, which I think this book should like win an award for best Pride Month cover. But like, this is such a gorgeous Pride Month cover. Like, I love it so much. And basically this book, woo! All right, let's get into it. Basically, this book follows our protagonist, Brian. He is from rural Appalachian, Ohio. He moved to New York City, where he fell in love with his partner and had a full and wonderful life. And then the AIDS epidemic hit, and he lost his partner to AIDS. And after losing his partner, he returns back to his hometown, where he basically moves back in with his family because he knows he's dying of AIDS. This is set in like the 80s, before we had really antivirals. So it is, I want to make a video of like best books I never want to read again, and this will be on the top of that list because it is heartbreakingly crafted. Like, it does not look away from the like disease that AIDS is. It does not look away from the homophobia that he experienced, and the way it really like how it affects your relationship with your family. And it is beautiful. Like, it's so well done. It executes that premise perfectly, honestly. And as someone who like grew up basically after AIDS no longer became quite as big of a deal, this was something I hadn't really seen as much beyond like watching documentaries or like doing some reading. But this is the most like unflinching look at it that I had ever experienced, and I think this book is so important, and I just really can't recommend it enough. Definitely like make sure that you're ready for it, but it is a genius book. Oh, and the title is a David Bowie song, so there's a lot of David Bowie references if that's your jam. My next recommendation is basically just Tennessee Williams' entire body of work. I have 3 of his plays in A Streetcar Named Desire, The Glass Menagerie, and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. A Streetcar Named Desire is one of my all-time favorite stories. While it does have gay characters in it, and it's not super great, while a lot of these stories are about repressing how if you are gay and the trauma, and like there's not any happy queer stories in his work for sure, but I think it really helps to refute the idea that like queer people have always existed. These plays were wrote in the 50s. Queer people in the South have always existed, and these plays are like a direct reflection of Tennessee Williams' trauma, but that's why they're so good. Like, that's not why they're so good, but they are phenomenal. Like, they are phenomenal plays. They are phenomenal. I think Cat on a Hot Tin Roof has the most, like, like an actual character who's gay in it of his work. I haven't read these two yet. They're on my TBR for this month. And A Streetcar Named Desire does have a gay character, but by no means is he, like, primarily part of the story. But definitely to read an own voices queer author, like, I would highly recommend Tennessee Williams. It's sort of this classic literature. It really transcends it's definitely not shelved in, like, gay literature, you know, because it really, this work transcended just that identity for him, and I think that's also really important and powerful too. That even in this time, we didn't have to define people just by their queerness. So definitely recommend his body of work. And then finally, I want to talk about two books that I am, like, are on my TBR right now. The first I'm like halfway through and I am in love is I Wish You All the Best by Mason Deaver, which is a story about a teen in North Carolina, like rural North Carolina-ish, who basically comes out to their parents as non-binary and is promptly kicked out of the house and reunites with their older sister, and it's sort of just dealing with their life and how that feels in a modern setting. And I really love it so far. I'm like 30% of the way through. Also, y'all, my library, they made like these bookmarks that they have in all of the like queer books that they have on the table, and like, y'all, I wish that this stuff had been there when I was a kid at the library. Like, I live in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee, y'all. Like, I don't live in no big city. And I'm so happy that, like, these books are there, they're available, they are like put in the front of the library, and it just warms my heart so much. If I know that this book has been really pretty popular, on the more popular side of Bookstagram, and if you have not picked it up yet, like, definitely pick it up. It's like a really cute YA romance type feel. Like, it's not like a hard-hitting YA romance, I don't think, but so far I've absolutely loved it and cannot recommend it enough. Then there is Pew by Catherine Lacey, which is something I am just itching to read this story. And basically a stranger comes into town and falls asleep in the church, and nobody can tell this person's gender, who they are, and it's just kind of this small rural community, like, coming to terms with this, like, non-binary person that just popped up in the middle of the church. And I think this one's gonna make me cry, I really do. So I'm so excited to read it. If you've read either of these, tell me how much you love them in the comments. I can't wait to talk about them with all of y'all. So I hope there is at least one book on this list that piqued your interest, that you're wanting to read, even if it's just Red, White, and Royal Blue. But I definitely wanted to sort of offer a different lens to look at queer books for Pride Month that I don't really see covered a lot on BookTube, so I wanted to provide that. So I hope you enjoyed this, and thanks for hanging out, y'all.